Welcome back to this Football Manager 2018 experiment where we're trying to see if Egypt can win the World Cup. This is part 4 of the experiment, so if you haven't watched parts 1, 2 and 3, please go and check them out first. Thanks to your support on parts 1, 2 and 3, I've holidayed another 20 years and I've gone straight through to the end of the 2070 World Cup this time round. We're not going to look at each individual 4-year segment in this part. But I thought I'd start with the Egyptian Premier League because we have seen some different winners. As you can see, Wada Degla managed to win it a couple times. El Deklilia, I'm murdering these pronunciations, I do apologise as usual. Haris El Hadoud and El Masri have also managed to win it. So Al Ahly's dominance has ended. They haven't even finished in the top 3 the last 3 seasons. Not really sure what's happened to them. Their reputation's gone down to 3 stars. Their finances are insecure. Something has gone very wrong for Al Ahly, and I don't really know why. That's quite interesting. They've got an 88,000 seater stadium. Is that new, or is that what they actually playing in real life? I have no idea, to be honest. But anyway, the current champions, El Masri, they've had a steady rise, as you can see, and they're now champions. They're in the African Champions League, so Al Ahly must have fallen out of this competition as well, which they dominated for quite a few years. So we haven't seen an Egyptian winner since 2065. But El Masri have managed to be runners-up twice, with Al Ahly runners-up the 2 seasons before. So they're still doing pretty well, but South Africa seem to be dominating at the moment. If we just have a look at the Egyptian Premier League, they're still second. They actually dropped to 4th in the competition reputation, I guess below the Tunisian and Moroccan Premier League competitions. So that's not a great sign for Egypt, is it? Have they managed to finally win a World Cup? Have they dominated world football? I mean, they were dominating world football for a few years. Of course, they won the World Club Championship, Al Ahly, for quite a few years. But let's go to Egypt then and see where they currently are in the world rankings. They are 20th, which makes me think they haven't managed to win a World Cup, although they have been as high as 9th at the last World Cup. But that drop-off suggests maybe a poor World Cup. They do seem to drop every sort of 4 years at World Cups. They seem to get to a great peak and then they flop. They've still got some good players. Their best player plays for Manchester United, a 26-year-old with 92 caps, Mohamed Abdel Ghani. If we just look at his current ability and potential ability, he's a very good player, 177 current ability. And he signed for £104 million from Barcelona. That is the biggest fee we've seen yet for an Egyptian. So they've got some very good players at the moment. Let's just see. They've got 2 players with 177 current ability, and they both will be not too old. They'll be around, certainly 25, 26. They'll definitely be around for the next World Cup. They've got some good players here. They should be competing, getting through to quarterfinals, semi-finals of World Cups, I think, with this squad. If I was in charge of them, I'm pretty sure I'd be able to get something out of this team. I'm sure I would be able to. Anyway, let's look at the World Cup then. I presume they haven't managed to win the most recent one, but perhaps that golden generation from the previous part, perhaps they were able to keep going and win something back in the 2050s. But no, they haven't. You can see here, last few World Cups, Argentina won it twice in a row, with Spain, Germany, Spain and France winning it recently. Typical winners. We've not really had any shocks on this experiment. In some of my other experiments, we have seen shock winners of the World Cup, but with this Egypt one, we haven't. Austria runners-up. That's quite surprising, although they're a decent team, I suppose. They've got some good players in real life, and perhaps in the future they've managed to build some sort of golden generation. Denmark have finished 3rd. Turkey have finished 3rd. Turkey finished 2nd, of course, in 2050. But Egypt haven't won the World Cup, and that brings me on. Before we look at each individual World Cup in a little bit more detail, I've got an idea which you guys might be interested in, and I'm happy to do this idea as long as there is enough interest in this. Now, those of you that watched my Indonesian FM15 experiment, this is over 2 years ago now, but those of you that did watch that will know that in the last part, I took control of Indonesia and I managed to win the World Cup with them. They hadn't had any good managers. They were producing great players by that point, but they didn't seem to be able to attract a really good manager to take control of them. And with a good manager, I'm being modest here by saying that, but I managed to win the World Cup with Indonesia. And I'm happy to do the same with Egypt. I'm happy to holiday through to the start of the 2074 World Cup, take control of Egypt and see if I can win the World Cup with them. Hopefully there'll be some decent players. I'm sure there will be some because they seem to be producing good players still. Although some of the club teams are flopping, of course, at the moment, in particular our league. I'm sure they'll still produce good players by 4 years' time. Now, if there's enough interest, and I'm going to go for something crazy here, I'm going to say 750 likes. The first part of this experiment got over 9,000 views so far. The last two parts have got 4,000 views. So there's obviously enough of you watching this. So you can definitely hit 750 likes if there is enough interest from you for me to do a part 5 where I take control of Egypt. So it's up to you guys. If you want me to take control of Egypt, then hit that like button. Anyway, let's have a look at the World Cups in a bit more detail then and go back in time to, I guess, the 2054 World Cup and just see how Egypt got on. Did they qualify for starters? Let's have a look down. South Africa qualified. They've done quite well on this actually without me having to do much. China qualified. Jamaica. There's Egypt finishing 3rd. Below Ukraine and Germany. They did manage to win one game, I presume. Yeah, against Costa Rica. In fact, yeah, that's quite obvious because Costa Rica lost every single game. But yeah, once again, disappointment. They failed to qualify from their group. And that's the problem. They're producing good enough players, but they just, even if the group's slightly easier than previous year, they're still not being able to get out of the group. They did get to the quarterfinals once, didn't they? But overall, it's been a little bit disappointing. 2058 then. Let's see, South Africa managed to get out their group. Ivory Coast got to the World Cup, as you can see there. Congo, Ireland, Scotland, Iran, Egypt. Bottom of their group. That was a tough group, to be fair. Portugal, Germany, Mexico and Egypt. They've not really had much luck with the groups. But I think there was one season they had an easy group and they still failed to get out. So they failed to qualify 2 World Cups in a row from their group. 2062 World Cup then. Is this a little better for them? Or did they actually failed to qualify? Zimbabwe got to the World Cup but flopped miserably. Scotland got out their group, as you can see there. Morocco. Egypt didn't get to the World Cup. They failed to qualify for the 2062 World Cup. They've not missed many, but they've missed a few too many for my liking, because we've created the conditions for Egypt to produce good players, go on and do very well. Perhaps the club facilities now haven't really been upgraded since I did them about 30 years ago. I suppose they haven't really... another World Cup. 2066. They failed to qualify. And this is an easier group on paper. Maybe Switzerland and Ukraine are much stronger than we think. But yeah, below Japan, they managed to get a 2-2 draw against top of the group, Switzerland. But once again, they failed to qualify with Scotland, finishing top of their group above Brazil. That is a bit of a shock. And finally, the 2070 World Cup, the one that's just occurred. Now, previously, you may have noticed from the world rankings chart that I showed you at the start, they were 9th in the world rankings going into that 2066 World Cup, and then they finished bottom of their group, and they went all the way down to the 20s. So they should have been getting through to quarterfinals, being 8th or 9th in the world rankings. Anyway, 2070, did they qualify? Yes, they did, but once again, they finished in the group stage. So that's how a lot of World Cups in a row one of them they didn't even qualify, but they haven't got through to the knockout rounds for years and years and years, and it's a real shame. Finishing 2 points behind Colombia, they managed to get a win against Australia 2-0. But yeah, once again, not good enough from Egypt, and we're going to have to, I believe I could do quite well with Egypt. Maybe not win it, but I think I could get them through to a semi-final, especially this team right now. I don't know what sort of players will be around in 4 years' time, but hopefully there'll be some quality players, despite the fact some of the Egyptian clubs have flopped. Al Ahly is still the top club in Egypt, but financially they've just had some problems. So they need to get a new owner in, maybe, to really push them on. But there are some good teams. Military Production. What a name for a team. They've got insecure finances as well. And I swear... Oh, there's Ayman Yusuf. 5 caps for his country, but yeah, not particularly good play. They've got a hot prospect in Isaac Danso. Yeah, they're interesting. They were formed in 2004. They're quite a new club, really, at the start of the game. Anyway, I want to have a look at the African Cup of Nations. So, Egypt have managed to win it. In fact, look at this. They won it 3 times in a row. They won it twice in a row here. That's the first time they'd won it on this experiment. So they won it twice in a row. Tunisia then won it. Then Egypt won it 3 times in a row, beating Ivory Coast, South Africa and Tunisia in the final. This is their golden generation, isn't it? I think. Can't quite remember, but I feel like they still had their golden generation around this point. That was the opportunity to win the World Cup with this team between 2043 and 2053. That was their chance to win a World Cup, and they failed to do so. And they missed out. If I'd managed them at that point, maybe I would have managed to win the World Cup with them. Anyway, they finished second in 2061 and then first in 2065. They haven't featured in the top 3 since then, despite holding the competition in 2067. This is the CHAN, the African Championship of Nations, for players that only play in their respective leagues, I think. Something like that, which... maybe Egypt haven't taken part in it, but they have not finished in the top 3 for so many years, despite the fact they've still got a lot of players playing in the Egyptian league. So I'm surprised they haven't managed to win it, but perhaps they don't compete in it. I'm not 100% sure on the rules. I know someone said you have to have only players that play in Africa to take part in this competition, but they haven't won it since the start of the experiment, really. So, if there is enough interest, I will holiday through to 2074 and we'll go to, for example, looking at the 2070 World Cup, I'll probably holiday to just before the pre-friendlies for the World Cup. They managed to beat Brazil 3-2. They beat Belarus 3-0, I mean that's expected, but to beat Brazil 3-2 going into World Cup, you'd think, brilliant. They won their first game against Australia and then they flopped against England. I mean, that's a tough game, let's be fair. England are insanely good on pretty much every single Football Manager save, but they lost 5-2, and that just, I suppose, it destroyed their confidence going into the game against Colombia. And they conceded a 94th minute goal. I think a draw would have been good enough to get them through to the knockout stages, because Colombia wouldn't have picked up those 3 points, and I think they would have finished behind Egypt. But it wasn't to be, so... yeah, I'd holiday through to 2074 if we get 750 likes in the next 3 days. And I'll give Egypt a go. If not, if there's not enough interest, then I will just start something new. But, yeah. It's up to you guys, really. I will look at a few things before I go, though. Let's look at competitions. So this is what they've managed to win on this experiment. Plenty of African Cup of Nations. 2043, 45, 49, 51, 53 and 65. So they've done quite well in that. Haven't managed to win any under 20 World Cups. Anything else? African Championship of Nations, they won that twice. The under 20 African Cup of Nations, they have managed to win twice as well. Runners up quite a few times. They've won the African under 23 Cup of Nations 3 times. And I think that's it. But this is their World Cup history then, since the start of this save. Prior to this experiment, they'd qualified for 2 World Cups, but since then, 2018, 22, they missed out in the 2026 one, then they competed in the 30, missed out in 2034, 38, then in 42, this is their best World Cup, they got through to the quarterfinals and lost on penalties to Egypt. This was the start of that golden generation, I think. The next few years was very impressive for them in the African Cup of Nations. But they were so close here. And I feel like if they'd beaten Germany, they really would have had a good possibility of going on to win that. Because that team was really, really strong. But that's a long time ago now. Then they managed to qualify for the next 4 World Cups. But second round and then 3 group stages. Missed out on the 62. And then 2 more group stages. So it's just, they've underachieved. They really have. They've produced some quality players, but they've definitely underachieved. These are all the managers that they've had on the save. I think, let's see, who's the longest guy? I think this chap, 7 years, 353, almost 8 years in charge for Ayman Allah. This is the records. Top goal scorer is Hassan Ashur, who's still around. 172. This is insane. 172 goals in 152 caps for Egypt. That is ridiculous. He plays for Chelsea. Is he still playing, or was he might have retired from international duty, but that is absolutely incredible and great player as well. I didn't notice him in the Egyptian squad, so he might have retired now, but that is insane. If we have a player like him at the next World Cup, then we've got a chance. But He'd be 36 at the next World Cup. He might have retired completely. That's a bit of a shame because that is the best record I've seen for a long time on Football Manager in international terms. Let's just have a look where he's been. Moved to Shakhtar, then to Chelsea. And he's been a good player for Chelsea for a number of years. But the most expensive player is that guy that went from Barcelona to Man United. He will be around at the next World Cup. He'll be 30. So coming towards the end of his prime, but he should be at the peak of his powers if he's still playing for his country. Of course, there are players that retire early. Most capped player, though, Mahmoud Ramsey. I think I recognise that name. 208 caps. That's incredible. Remember Ayman Shawki? He retired as a player. We've still got his history. 135 goals in 165 games. I thought that was an impressive record. He was part of the Egyptian golden generation, but he's not as good as Hassan Ashur. What a player he is. Oh, I really wish I could manage him because he's incredible. Look at that. This is the best 11 for Egypt. So many caps here. Every single player in the first 11 has over 100 caps. Remember Dawada from back in the day. Mustafa Khalifa, we can click on him. That's his history, retired in 2056. It's not saved everyone. This is from Ramadan Sobhi, a real life player, of course, so he's in there. Mo Salah, he's not on there because he retired quite early from international duty, didn't he? Tariq Ramadan, remember him from back in the day. We can click on Aziz, he's actually a manager now in real life. And then Magdi, who's still playing as a goalkeeper, 148 caps for his country. I think we need a better goalkeeper because looking at Egypt, looking at the team, there's not a really good goalkeeper here. We need a better goalkeeper for the next World Cup. I suppose this 19-year-old could develop into a decent level goalkeeper, but other positions with okay defence. It's not world class though, but they do seem to produce very good players going forwards. If I can get the defence, if we can get a really good defender coming through, then they might actually have a chance. I think that's the problem. They conceded 5 goals against England and 3 against Colombia, probably because they don't have an amazing goalkeeper or the greatest defence in the world. Anyway, thanks for watching this experiment. It might be the last video. That's completely up to you guys. If it is the last one, then we'll start a new experiment, possibly another Can Country X win the World Cup. I know lots of you have suggested different things. You know, I'll probably do another one of these at some point. But until next time, enjoy FM18, and I'll see you very soon.